The Dallas Mavericks, instead of being in the news for strengthening their roster, are making headlines because their squad is actually getting weaker. Yup, Doncic's ankle injury gives the Mavericks a big scare. I mean, I'd be super worried if I were a Maverick after that ankle injury to Luka. It's understandable. Your best player gets injured. You'd feel the heat. How are you supposed to get by without him? But in Dallas's case, it's just a little bit more concerning. That's because no one has been doing a bigger and better carrying job than Luka Doncic this season.
Doncic looks like he's hurt, clutching at that left ankle.
It's obvious that the Mavericks are nothing without him. They don't only need Luka, they need him to play well. That is, if they have any chance of winning games regularly. That's why the Slovenian superstar has been dropping some sensational numbers this season, and currently leads the NBA in scoring. I love watching him play, but you've got to feel for the man. He's doing it all alone.
They're trying to play a zone now.
That's the second three-point play of the quarter.
And the Mavericks front office just isn't getting him any help. It's a wonder that his shoulders didn't already give way with all the lifting he's doing, but this one was towards his ankle, and it happened in a recent game against the Phoenix Suns, which, surprisingly, the Mavericks went on to win, despite Doncic lasting only a total of 3 minutes and 0 points. After the game, it was revealed that he'd be observed on a day-to-day basis. This means that the injury isn't that serious. Good news, of course, if you're a Mav, especially given the fact that there hasn't been any trade activity at all. However, Dallas almost immediately felt the impact of Doncic's injury, as the Mavericks fell to the Utah Jazz in Salt Lake City without their talisman. Now, don't get me wrong, Dinwiddie might be the only one who doesn't deserve any blame. He put on 2 consecutive big scoring displays in Doncic's absence. It led to the Mavericks winning against the Suns, but it wasn't enough to win against the Jazz.
And then they're double teaming Spencer Dinwiddie, but he's going to launch it from way downtown. Wow, they just backed off because that's a terrible shot.
However, anyone who caught the 2 games, or who has even caught a glimpse of the Mavericks, they just aren't the same without Luka. It's a miracle they won against the Suns, to be honest, and that's why it couldn't possibly be more obvious that the front office needs to get going. The trade deadline is approaching fast, so they need to start making some trades that can help Luka. I sincerely hope they do. Otherwise, they're just wasting their spectacular form this season, and it wouldn't even take much. For instance, a trade for Kyle Kuzma could make a lot of sense. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would the Wizards trade Kuzma, especially after they let Rui Hachimura leave? Yes, I know that the Wizards are planning on keeping Kuzma beyond the summer, and they've put plans in place to make it happen.
See him, he's looking at the clock right now, dribbles and just pulls over the outstretched hand of Alex Caruso.
However, you're telling me that they wouldn't be tempted into a possible trade should the Mavericks come knocking? In fact, the latest reports coming out of Dallas suggest that every player on the Mavs roster is up for grabs, except for Doncic, of course. And that means they can simply get on the phone with Washington, tell them to make their pick, and go nuts. A player like Kuzma would be a huge addition next to Luka, and presumably Christian Wood. He'd be a huge asset against potential playoff opponents New Orleans, Denver, or even Sacramento, and he's been in furious form this season. A peak in Kuzma is probably exactly what the Mavericks and Luka need, unless of course they can convince the Chicago Bulls to part with DeMar DeRozan. On paper, this is a much easier deal to conclude. DeRozan is a reliable scorer, and the Bulls are having a disastrous season. There just isn't any chemistry over there between Zach LaVine and DeRozan, and with LaVine just about out of the Mavs' reach, despite his questionable injury history, DeRozan could be a fantastic addition. Now, I know he's not the kind of player that someone would bet their house on to turn up in the playoffs, but players like DeRozan can genuinely improve when they're playing alongside great players. More importantly, he would be coming in as a second scorer.
Feeds DeRozan. DeRozan, pump fake for the win. Got it again!
And for the Mavs, it'll be a huge upgrade, considering no one else is even close to producing the numbers that DeRozan is putting up. I would love to see how his numbers translate in Dallas, should the Mavericks go for it. And as I've already mentioned, this isn't a trade that'll take much convincing, like the Kuzma one. In fact, the one thing that DeRozan has over Kuzma is experience. That too is playoff experience. But if these players don't rock the Mavericks boat, then I've got a shooter up for grabs for the Mavericks. Yup, you guessed it correctly. Bojan Bogdanovic Bogdanovic. I understand that he's not a name that would make Dallas fans jump out of their seats, but one thing is for certain, Bojan is a scorer, and not just any scorer. The 10-year veteran remains one of the most sought-after players in the league right now, and Dallas would have done extremely well if they'd gotten him. After all, he's one of those players who'd fit into the Mavericks setup with ease. He's a sensational shooter, and the Mavericks like to shoot. It's the perfect match, but the only downside is the obvious competition the Mavericks would have to put up with. It's one of those no-brainer trades, if the Mavericks can get it over the line, but not an easy one to complete, because the Pistons know Bojan is extremely popular. In fact, he doesn't need to convince the Mavericks to go for him. He did just drop 29 points on 66% shooting and 71% from three-point range. He's free to leave too, very much like OG Anunoby. Yep, the Raptors' two-way forward could leave before the trade deadline too, and boy would it be some coup. Anunoby has been one of the best defenders in the league this season. With the Raptors eyeing a total rebuild, this could be one of those trades that makes a bit too much sense. He's having his best scoring season, and given his versatility defensively,
a denial! Rack it up, Danny G!
Anunoby could be a sensational addition and the perfect wing partner for Doncic. He can do it all, and given the Mavs' struggles in defense this season, it really makes so much sense to go all out for him, especially when you consider that he's on a relatively affordable contract, and he's very young as well. But if the focus is fixing the defense, then the Mavericks can turn toward John Collins from Atlanta as well. Again, not exactly the most head-turning trade. Collins would solve a major issue for the Mavericks though. They've struggled big time in terms of rebounds, and someone like Collins fixes that almost immediately. He's not having the greatest of seasons, but he's still averaging almost 8 rebounds per night.
Young, nice pass, Collins with the throwdown! Another fabulous find by Young!
And averages more than 1 block per game. This has regressed compared to his wonder season from 2 seasons ago, and maybe that could tempt the Mavericks a bit into making a move, because usually in the NBA, a change in scenery can do wonders. More importantly, Collins, under a proper coach like Jason Kidd, could actually improve, and with Christian Wood in the mix as well, the Mavericks would have plenty of options in the paint.
They got Nance again guarding Luka. Shot clock at 10 seconds. Nance keeps him from getting further down into the lane, but he still scores.
Either way though, there are plenty of other options for the Mavs too. The question is, will they make a trade before the deadline? See you in the next video.